everyone, we're going to go ahead and review our science information for Cycle 2, starting with Week 1. What occurred on each day of creation? Day 1, Earth, space, time, light. Day 2, atmosphere. Day 3, dry land and plants. Day 4, sun, moon, and stars. Day 5, fish, birds, sea creatures. Day 6,
dry land.
And land animals, Adam and Eve. What are some land biomes? Grasslands and deserts and scrublands and tundra. Deciduous forest, coniferous forest, tropical rainforest could be your home. These are some land biomes. What are 3 types of consumers? 3 types of consumers are herbivore, carnivore, omnivore. What are some parts of the food chain? Some parts of the food chain are producers, consumers, decomposers. What are some cycles in nature? Water cycle, carbon and oxygen cycle. Then there is the last one, which would be nitrogen cycle. How do animals react to environmental change? How do animals react to environmental change? Adapt, migrate, hibernate. Adapt, migrate, hibernate. What are 6 forms of pollution? 6 forms of pollution are noise, air, water, land, thermoradioactive. Noise, air, water, land, thermoradioactive. What are some aquatic biomes? What are some aquatic biomes? Ponds and lakes, streams and rivers, wetlands, estuaries, oceans and seas. What are some aquatic biomes? Ponds and lakes, streams and rivers, wetlands, estuaries, oceans and seas. What are some parts of the sun? Some parts of the sun are core radiative zone, convective zone, sunspots, photosphere, solar flare, and corona, some parts of the sun. What are the names of the planets? Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. What are the phases of the moon? What are the phases of the moon? New crescent, quarter, gibbous, full. What are the phases of the moon? New crescent, quarter, gibbous, full. What are some other bodies found in our solar system? Make your sun, asteroids, meteoroids, meteorites that can hit a planet's surface, and comets. Asteroids, meteoroids, meteorites, and comets. What are some names of U.S. space missions? Some names of U.S. space missions are Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Shuttle. What are some states of matter? Solid, liquid, gas, plasma. These are the states of matter. Solid, liquid, gas, plasma. These are the states of matter. What are 2 forms of energy? 2 forms of energy are, can you do it? Potential, put your leg back for a kick, potential and kinetic. Good job. What is Newton's third law of motion?
Potential and kinetic.
What is Newton's first law of motion? Newton's first law of motion states that an object at rest tends to remain at rest, and an object in motion tends to continue moving in a straight line at a constant speed unless an outside force acts upon it. What is Newton's second law of motion? Newton's second law of motion states that force equals mass times acceleration. What is Newton's second law of motion? Newton's second law of motion states that force equals mass times acceleration. What is Newton's third law of motion? Newton's third law of motion states that for every action, boing, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Boing. Newton's third law of motion states that for every action, boing, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Boing. What is the first law of thermodynamics? The first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. What is the second law of thermodynamics?
Or destroyed.
The second law of thermodynamics, also called the law of entropy, explains why heat flows from an area of higher temperature to an area of lower temperature. What is the third law of thermodynamics? The third law of thermodynamics explains that it is impossible to reach the state of absolute zero temperature. The third law of thermodynamics explains that it is impossible to reach the state of absolute zero temperature. What are some ways light is observed? Some ways light is observed is reflection, refraction, spectrum, wave, particle. How does heat flow? This is how heat flows. Radiation, conduction, convection. How heat flows. How does heat flow? This is how heat flows. Radiation, conduction, convection. How heat flows. What units are used to measure electricity? Ohms measure resistance, volts measure voltage, amps measure current, watts measure power. What units are used to measure electricity? Ohms measure resistance, volts measure voltage, amps measure current, watts measure power.